Thanks very much, Jen. What I would like to say is I don't feel I've got very much else to add to that, because the last two speakers they've just given so much information and practical things that can actually be used. And it was fantastic to hear, actually, because we also use a lot of the same kind of practices there. I just thought I'd give a little bit of background about myself, because I suppose I'm that person with lived experience. However, I did start my own social enterprise through that lived experience. And I thought that tied in with one factor that Caroline spoke about. She spoke about the 6 hours of trauma, but then she said at the very end, she was focusing on all the risk. And it was about also, where's the resilience in this? And absolutely, people who have had traumatic experiences can have amazing resilience, and they can bring so much to the table. And when we did the Mentimeter at the very beginning, I thought to myself, you know, we ask, what is this risk and safety about? And whilst I can see everybody putting their point of view in about the fear and the safety and all the rest of it, I'm on the other end of the scale that says, please listen, you know, we want to share this experience because we have so much to share, and we have this explosion of voice that we want to actually bring to it. So whilst there is that end of the scale where there is the fear, there's also the other end of the scale where you've got people really eager to help you to actually shape these services and move forward. So I'm from that end of the scale that really wants to share that. I was a family who went into trauma and had never really faced the services. Didn't really know what it was all about, and ended up, you know, having to deal with doctors, GPs, psychiatrists, police, the judicial system, all of these type of things, and along with that, all the social problems that come with that. So that's your finances, your mental health, your housing situation, your family relationships, your friends' relationship, and all the impact that actually goes along with that. And to me, that was a bit of a shock, you know, to think, oh my goodness, does everybody have to face this? Does everybody who's gone through trauma have to deal with this? And unfortunately, listening to people's stories, quite often they do go through very, very similar routes. However, there is a way. And my organisation, Families in Trauma, started as Families in Trauma because that's where I was on my journey. I wanted to be sharing a story. However, it became about recovery. And so we've actually just rebranded, and we've got a new website coming up, and it's actually because we are Families in Trauma and Recovery, because that is actually the most important aspect of it. So when we're in trauma, you know, there's lots of different things there that we have to deal with. But we want to see that there is a kind of recovery for people, and it helps to listen to others with lived experience. So I had the privilege really of actually being involved in a couple of different projects, and I just thought I'd share a little bit about them. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, you probably heard, I looked at this last night, and it was Seneca, a Roman philosopher, and he actually said, it's not because things are difficult that we dare not venture. It's because we dare not venture that they're difficult. And so this venturing into what we're doing here can really, really help everybody, the experts by profession, by leadership, and by experience. And by working together, we're getting a really fantastic whole system approach to it. So the two projects that I've kind of been involved in, the first one, strangely enough, was with the NHS. And I'll be really honest, because of my experience of dealing with the NHS and the kind of revolving door that everybody talks about, and going from here to there, and oh, you don't come here, no, you go there, and that's not the person to help you, you should go. And it's like, oh my goodness, this is just horrendous. So I didn't have a great experience. So when I went into this co-production, I'll be honest, and I was the biggest skeptic. So, you know, I went into it not antagonistic, but very, very skeptical, very cynical, and not believing that it could actually take place. I just thought, what a load of rubbish. I don't believe it. So that was my point of view when I went into it. However, I still had that tiny little bit that wanted the change, that really wanted to see that it was going to make a difference. So I did enter it. And I'm glad that I actually did, because I've come completely full circle where I think this can actually work. This can help people. So the NHS Health Promotion Team in Fife had a suicide awareness campaign, and they do an annual campaign on it, and normally it sits within their own system. They all come up with their various different ideas, they have their committees, blah, 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 and that's it, and it goes out, and it's an annual campaign. Last year they decided to ask Fife Voluntary Action for volunteers from the lived experience team. Now, I'm on the lived experience team within Fife Voluntary Action, because we want to share our lived experience with lots of different bodies, and it just so happened this was the NHS. And it was actually a wonderful experience, because they were so, the humility they had was actually really quite lovely, because they were saying, we don't have this experience, but we want to listen to what you've got there. And so quite often they would share with us, this is what we are going to put out. How do you feel about this? And this would then come back to us. We would have discussions about it. And the key to it was we saw the changes happening. They actually listened to the voice, and then they'd say, oh, actually, we never thought about that. Maybe we'll change that. And by the time the campaign actually went out, there were a lot of changes that had been brought about by the people with experience. And that was a really, really good thing. And they had never included actual live voices, because they didn't know how to do it at the time. Their expertise, I mean, I actually do media, and so we were able to record people with lived experience and then be able to incorporate clips of these interviews with various different people into their campaign. So that went out as part of their digital toolkit. And at first, when it went up, they were like, what do we do? I said, why have you just actually written out the words there of what the people said? And they said, but that's what we did. I said, yeah, but we recorded it. We actually heard their voices, and that's what people need to hear. So they then went back, changed it, and actually put the audio clips within the digital toolkit. And that went on the online, went out to all businesses within Fife and anybody else who wanted to access it. So it was a wonderful example of how I really completely transformed my view of everything by the end of it. But the interesting thing about this was, we then went on to do another work with on the inclusivity and co-production report. Now, what was interesting, we did this report after I had done the actual project with NHS. So we didn't actually have the information that we had in the report, but we went about doing the health promotion work that we did basically by feeling our way. And we didn't have any set rules. I mean, we've got lovely, facilitation guide that Claire's going to share with us, and there's lots of things there, but we try to just be respectful of other people. So even if we don't have, really detailed facilitation rules, we can still do it if we actually care about people and just care about their feelings and just try to kind of navigate that as we're going along. And one of the things that I feel about it as well is we can't have a cookie cutter template either for actually doing these projects, because every single one of them is going to be individual, and every one of them is going to bring an individual experience to it. So you can't fall back on that, oh, well, we've got a template, what is it? Let's get the book out and we'll follow the template, because that doesn't actually work when you're dealing with people anyway. They know that. They know that you're following that. What they actually want is a heart-to-heart connection with somebody. And when we can do that, then we really start connecting. We give the respect to each other, and there's so much you can get out of it. But the report, I've actually sent it over, so you will be able to get a copy of the inclusivity and co-production report. And that was done with NHS and Fife Voluntary Action as the third sector interface with their lived experience team, and also myself as an expert by experience in our organisation. We did learn a lot on that project as well. It took actually over a full year to do that project. And so really that's one of the things to remember when you're going into it, is to be able to give time. It's a different method. And so you have to give time to be able to give respect to the voices that are there. Some of the kind of barriers we looked at was, first of all, me not believing that it would actually be possible. Trust and integrity is a really, really big thing. If people don't feel safe, then they're not going to actually share anything with you. They have to feel safe. So that safety has to be in there in the first place. And there are barriers to that because, you know, people with lived experience, some want to share their experience, which I did, but others might not want to share it quite so much. And it's also about what are you asking somebody to share when you're asking them to share their story? You know, are you asking them to go into details of their story, or are you asking them to pick out the parts that help them? So there's different ways of people sharing their story, and you have to be really clear about what you're actually asking them, because there are times where you don't need to go into certain aspects of detail that are actually maybe going to re-traumatize that person. Sometimes you don't even need that information, but there are other things that you can get out of it. So the expectations at the beginning have to be set. And this sharing the story, you have to understand what you're actually asking people to give you there. And although they're kind of barriers, you still might find people still want to share. So there are positive things that can come out of that, such as that those with lived experience do want to actually share their story. It's just about how they do that, if we can create that safe environment. And when people can actually drop their professional hats when they go into it, they make a huge difference. So we actually enter these relationships on an equal footing. So we often say, leave your hat at the door. You know, we're just human beings here. We're just all equal human beings. Let's bring our experience to the table. And that doesn't mean to say that people with, you know, experts by profession, they may have their own personal things and personal lived experience that they can bring to it as well. So there's loads can be done there. And what we actually did from all of this is we took all this kind of learning and we then decided to do it in our peer-to-peer, because we do peer-to-peer training, and we're training people to be able to support other people. And we took a lot of that into there, and we actually created our peer-to-peer. Everyone is a unique training course, so that we do it as a co-production now, because every project, we love it so much that we're actually, every project is like a co-production project, because there's so much to be gained out of it. But obviously safety is a huge thing, but I saw at the very beginning all the words that actually came in there, and people, you can see fear there, absolute fear that people are going to get this wrong. But I think if you can look at it, that actually there's so much to be gained out of it, so much for yourselves and for the people who you're actually inviting into that space, that if you can look at it as an opportunity rather than a threat, it just changes our perspective a little bit. And if we go into it with that, we're actually going to be looking for ways to take care of people. And that's humanity. That isn't any, you know, set framework that you have to have written down. That's tapping into things that you would like to experience. How would you like to be treated? How would you like to enter a project like that? So thinking in those terms can really help to build up some of the safety mechanisms that you might be a bit frightened of, you know, but there's ways to go about it. And if you go in with an intentional view that you are going to look at the safety, but look at the opportunities as well, then you can create it, but it will be individual to every project that you go into, and you can't use the cookie cutter. So that's the one thing I would say out of it. Please don't use a cookie cutter one, because one thing, it shuts people down if they think, well, this is just a policy or a procedure that has been developed in the past. There's nothing individual there. We now, you know, these projects we're doing with individual people. So we've got to take that into consideration. And I'm actually thrilled to hear that people are all working together like this, because for me, that's how it should have been in the first place. It wasn't there, and yet it's developing. And I think we're at a point of no return now, because people are starting to understand that. So therefore, let's get the mechanisms into place and the frameworks, but make sure the frameworks are really flexible to each project that you're actually working on. So as I said, I couldn't add too much more because there was so much great stuff came out beforehand, and I'm mindful of the time. But if anybody has any questions, I can answer them later on as well. Thank you.